record. So my apologies. I'm going to start over so that everybody that listens to the replay gets everything. Sorry about that. I am incredibly human. So iridology has been around for nearly 200 years, and our understanding of iridology has undergone massive changes, and there's been so much research that's moved us forward. But it's only moved those of us forward who have chosen to keep up with it, and that's a really important thing to remember. Somehow in that moving forward, though, some of the old language has persisted, and some of those old names are misleading and actually reflect a lack of understanding of modern iridology, and those terms need to be gotten rid of. So this tutorial is all about getting current with our language. In the holistic world, we avoid diagnosing, and unless of course we are licensed naturopaths where that is permitted, we recommend our therapies based on symptoms and on our understanding of the body, but we do not recommend therapies based on a disease name, because we know that that's an error-riddled way of working. Giving something a wrong diagnosis means you give the wrong treatment, and it means your client gets no benefit. And we truly strive to avoid that, as does everybody who works in the helping and health professions. But you will notice as we do this that the old language, the language that used to be, is very diagnostic in nature. And the new language is actually much more descriptive in nature. And that's where we want to be. And we have Bob Scribner joining us on the live webinar. Thank you so much. He's a certified iridologist, and it's so good to have you with us. And we've got Peggy Cockrell joining us as well. Thanks for being there on the live webinar with me. There is, and I'm inviting you now, if you'd like, to go ahead and make a note of this webinar or this internet address, this URL, website address. If you want to be kept in the loop as to when these lives are happening and when webinars are happening. When you go to this internet address, iridology.education, there's going to be a pop-up box. And if you opt in on that pop-in box, you'll receive a constitutional iridology map download. You'll also be added to my email list to be kept apprised of when things are happening. I do send out 2 short emails a week, and they're always a little bit of information about iridology and a link to the next upcoming webinar or online event. Let's hop in with our language study. The old language for this kind of marking that is sitting right here, these loops in the iris, the old language for this is lesion. The new language is lacuna. The definition of lesion is a region or organ or tissue which has suffered damage through injury or disease, such as a wound, an ulcer, an abscess, or tumor. The up-to-date understanding of this marking is that the lay of the iris fibers does not change as a result of trauma. I did a full webinar on this about a week ago, and so you can look back through the different webinars I've posted and possibly find it there. Lacuna, on the other hand, simply means an unfilled space or gap. A lacuna brings our attention to a reaction field in the iris, but it does not tell us what is inherently wrong in that area. Sodium ring or cholesterol ring versus lipemic diathesis. So this would be this milky white ring that's going around the edge of the iris here. While there is sometimes a correlation between the presence of a cholesterol ring and hardening of the arteries and senility, because its other name is arcus senilis, don't you just love that one? It's not a really strong correlation. And so the new name that we use for this is lipemic diathesis. And this name includes corneal arcus, corneal annulus, and corneal opacity. Those are other terms that are considered to be modern terms. And what this suggests is that there is an imbalance in how the body manages the blood fats and how it deals with the carbohydrates in the body as well. but it has nothing to do with sodium, nothing to do with cholesterol. I've seen this in people whose cholesterol has been totally normal, and I have seen that it's not been there in people with elevated cholesterol, so it's not an indication of cholesterol. The nerve ring or the stress ring, so that's these little rings coming around in the eye and here. When we see these, we actually, again, call them contraction furrows is the new term. And these are not a result of stress. You don't get them by being stressed. They won't go away when the stress goes away. They are actually an indicator that this person tends to always be ready for the next crisis. This person lives in the sympathetic response zone. This person does like to be busy all the time. These rings are more apparent when the pupil is dilated and the iris tissues of the humeral and ciliary zones are contracted. So when we have the distance between the pupil and the edge of the eye getting narrower, these contraction furrows appear deeper and darker. And it's not really, they are deeper and darker, but that's not an indication of their severity. It's an indication of how much that tissue has been contracted and compressed. Then we have veinous congestion versus a circulatory ring. So those of you who are with me on Instagram might not see this as quickly. And I've got this little pop-up here that is just annoying, and I don't know how to get rid of it. Haven't learned that one yet. Oh, let's go back to where we were. There we go. Can you see around the bottom of this eye, there's a bit of a mauve or slightly purple or blue ring. That is what used to be called venous congestion. We now call it a circulatory ring. And it's not venous congestion because it's not always the veins that are sluggish. I see a much stronger correlation with this sign when there's blood sugar imbalance, tired adrenals, or the person is prone to tired adrenals, because blood sugar imbalances and the predisposition towards adrenal glands getting stressed have a huge impact on peripheral circulation. So I always ask about cold hands and cold feet when I see this kind of thing, and then I ask about blood sugars and cravings. Parasite lines or radial furrows. So the old language for these lines that radiate outwards is parasite lines. The new way of describing them is radial furrows. What we now know is that these actually have no correlation to parasites at all. The irides can only teach us about inherent possibilities. They cannot teach us about things that are not a part of our DNA. Parasites are not a part of our DNA. They don't change our DNA. So to make the pronouncement that a person has parasites based on the presence of radial furrows is inaccurate. Radial furrows is a more apt name in this case because these are furrows or separations in the stroma of the eye that radiate out from the central part of the iris. So drug spots, which we no longer call them drug spots, we now call them pigment. Used to be called psora or itch spots or all kinds of interesting names. My observation with these is that North Americans are cleanse happy. Seems to be a badge of honor to announce that one is full of toxins and is doing a cleanse. How much smarter would it be just to make the necessary lifestyle changes to not put trash in the body and to never have to do a cleanse again? I believe that's truly possible, and I aim for all my clients to be in that position where they don't need to be doing cleanses. There's been no scientific proof that these areas of pigment are the result of chemicals or of medication buildup or of mineral buildup like sulfur. No indication that they indicate toxicity of any kind. There is no proof that these pigments can be cleansed out. They are there when they are there. They do accumulate over time, which is also an inherent predisposition. Okay, And what we know is that the color of the pigment teaches us which organ is likely inherently more prone to stress, and the location of the pigment tells us which other organ is likely to suffer because of that stress. So pigment gives us two different types of information, but it's not that there was toxic exposure or accumulation of any kind. Then we have the absorption ring or what we now call the gray interpupillary border. Now I'm going to move my phone camera a lot closer to see if we can see this on Instagram. Can you see right around the pupil? There is a bit of a gray edge that has, as it reaches into the iris, it is a little bit rough. It's not smooth. It's a little bit serrated, if you will. That gray area that has the serrated edge is the inner pupillary border. And it used to be thought that it meant that there was a problem with absorbing food, absorbing nutrients. What we now know is that this correlates to the stomach lining, and it teaches us about the stomach's inherent ability to be limited in its ability to secrete digestive juices. Now, the interesting thing is that calling this an interpupillary border is actually a correct ophthalmological term, which is really cool indeed. This is what used to be called a rheumatic eye. We now call it a febrile eye. Rheumatic, again, what a name. And if we were to call it a rheumatic eye, wouldn't you be thinking that the person is more prone to things like rheumatoid arthritis or rheumatic fever, something with rheum in it? And that's not true in this case. The febrile eye is usually found in someone who fevered easily as a child and may be still prone to fevers when their immune system is activated. So when we see these blue eyes that have all white fiber, bright white fiber in them, then we want to be asking about their immune system and their predisposition towards fevering. This type of eye, where the fiber structure is quite erratic, used to be described as having a weak constitution, that this person had a genetically weak constitution. And it used to be taught that you could change that by changing their diet and giving them supplements. You could straighten out these fibers and things like that. Now, wouldn't it just make your day to be told that you have a weak constitution? Doesn't that just make you feel like a loser from the get-go? In reality, whether your fibers are densely packed and fairly straight or wavy with woven and gappy areas, it shows your predisposition, not your actual condition. We now call this the connective tissue subtype, and we know that it correlates more strongly to people having a slightly less robust collagen structure. However, having said that, I have worked with clients who've had this kind of a constitution, and they displayed no weakness at all because they'd already learned to give their bodies what the body needed to be well. In modern constitutional iridology, again, we call this the connective tissue subtype. Their nutrition likely will need to be on track for the rest of their entire life to really maximize their health potential. But is that really so different from any of us? We all should actually be making those efforts to protect our bodies through our nutrition. This kind of an eye, on the other hand, was called a strong constitution. And that was the old language, and it always shows up as neatly organized, fairly straight, fairly densely packed fibers. In the modern constitutional iridology, we call this the neurogenic subtype. This person often does not learn the lessons of health while they are young, because their resilient body can make do with poor nutrition for many years. When the body's had enough abuse, though, look out. That so-called strong constitution will collapse. The eye structure won't change, but the person's health will begin to display all kinds of issues. So these people often want everything to be just so. They crave peace and calm, hence the name neurogenic. They'll often come into the office when they're in their 40s or 50s and say, I don't get it. I feel like I'm falling apart at the seams. I've never been sick a day in my life. Yet when you look at how they've treated their body, they've not treated it well, and they've broken it down. And so it takes a lot of effort for them to get their health back. I'm going to bring my phone closer to my screen again. Sorry for that if it made you seasick. Starting at the pupil again and moving outwards, not going out very far, just inside that ring that is going encircles the pupil entirely. Do you see there are some very small diamond and teardrop shaped shapes that are very black, dark gray or black? Those used to be called bowel pockets. We now call them crypts. We don't have a way to look inside the person's body really to confirm if there are bowel pockets in the colon. Those medically would be called diverticuli. Crypts don't tell us that there are actual pockets or diverticuli there. They suggest a weakness with reduced energy in that area, which may make it harder for the body to offload toxins or utilize nutrients through that tissue. The autonomic nerve wreath, or the ANW as it used to be called, is now called the collarette. The collarette is the ring, and I'm just going to use my finger to point here. It's a big finger in the way, is this ring coming around here. The autonomic nerve wreath teaches us so much more than just about the autonomic nervous system. It teaches us about the balance between the sympathetic and parasympathetic systems. And it also teaches us about the tone of the intestinal tract. If the collarette is pigmented, we can also gain insight, more insight into how those tissues are being affected by other organs. Tells us a bit about the personality. Is this person more of an introvert or more of an extrovert? All those kinds of things. So lots of good information from the collarette. Then we have the lymphatic rosary, which we now call the hydrogenoid subtype. I'll use a pen, this is a little better. As we come around the edge of the iris, we see this white, clouding, dotty stuff coming around. That is what used to be called the lymphatic rosary. And for some people, the religious connection isn't appreciated. I didn't grow up in a religion that used a rosary, so you know, some people don't like that kind of a link. However, that's not what's important here. When we see the hydrogenoid subtype, it teaches us that the lymphatic system may be inherently predisposed to being sluggish, and more importantly, that surface circulation may also be prone to being sluggish. So that's just more information than just the lymphatic system. So that is our little trip into old versus new language, and hopefully that will help you to bring, if you're practicing the old language, it'll help you to bring it up to date. Just want to give you a heads up because registration's not open yet. The next go round of Confident Nutritionist Dynamic Iridology, which is an online iridology certification preparation course, will be starting on Wednesday, January 15th. It's taught via live webinars. That will be 5 o'clock till 7 o'clock every Wednesday for 20 sessions. Registration will be opening December 1st. And again, if you want to be kept apprised and in the loop of when registration opens and things like that, just hop on over to iridology.education and opt in for the Iridology map that is offered to you there, and that will add you to the list. It's been a pleasure being with you today. I hope you have found this interesting and informative, and that it's maybe carried your Iridology training ahead by a little bit. I look forward to seeing you again on Friday at 12 noon Mountain when we do another Iridology Education Facebook Live and Instagram Live. See you then. Bye for now.